Hi everyone, welcome to the latest and greatest episode of Failing Up. Today I'm sitting with Coco, who's the founder of Amulet, a recruitment firm for startups. In this episode, we talk about the power of maintaining and building relationships throughout your career, as well as the importance of taking risks early on throughout your career rather than later when you have bigger commitments, the different pitfalls you can fall into as a founder looking for talent and as talent looking for jobs. Coco.
Claire.
How are you?
Amazing. I've missed you.
I'm so excited to have you here. This is the moment we've all been waiting for.
We have been.
Okay, so we were actually just talking before we started bowling.
Yes.
And I was talking about how excited I am because I don't have a lot of women who come on the podcast. Yeah. And it's not that I don't pitch them. I just want to say it's not that I don't pitch them. It's just
Let the record show.
It's just that they don't answer. And you had just told me that you actually changed the messaging for female founders versus male founders. Why is that? And what do you change exactly?
Okay, so a little context here. I read a book called Influence, and it's a lot about like social psychology and just like the importance of, I guess, how you're coming across. Mm-hmm. And I found that there's a lot of like kind of unspoken messages between people when they talk. So like girl to girl, you and I are going to have a certain, I think, vibe that I'm not going to have with a male founder. So like, let's say I was reaching out to you founder to founder, or if I was reaching out to you as a candidate, I would honestly just be like, Claire, I like love your profile. I like love what you've been doing. Do you want to talk? Mm-hmm. Friendly. I'm not going to say that to a guy.
But why not? Do they just not receive it well? What do they receive better then?
If I said to a guy, hey, I love your profile, let's talk, he's going to think I'm talking about something else. So when I reach out to a guy, I'm just like, hey, like, I have a great opportunity across my desk. I think you'd be a fit. They've raised $50 million, 10 million ARR. Let's talk. It's much more kind of direct and to the point versus when I'm talking to women, I'm like, you know, I want to make them feel safe. I want to make them feel like this is an opportunity for them. And I think also another thing is like, if you look at men always are applying to jobs that they're underqualified for.
Yes, the statistic. What's the statistic? It's women apply to jobs they are 80 to 90% qualified for.
Yep.
Men apply to jobs they are 30 to 40% qualified for.
Exactly. So when I'm doing outbound to a candidate, I'm like, okay, I need to make this woman feel like she is qualified. Even if she doesn't hit all the criteria, I know I need to make her feel that way. So then she even has, you know, the kind of conviction to talk to me and even explore the opportunity. Versus with men, I'm kind of just more so trying to gas them up enough to be like, hey, you know, talk to me. But I want to make sure the girls feel, they feel heard and they feel ready and they feel excited.
Yeah, I guess because I've been on the receiving end of having recruiters reach out to me. And I guess there's a lot of, I don't know, I'm not a guy, so or someone else that I feel like has a lot of workplace confidence. So immediately I'm like, I'm not really qualified.
Exactly.
Or when I've applied for jobs in the past, it's delusional. And I'm just like, I feel like this is insane.
Yeah.
I remember I was working with one of my other friends in recruitment on finding jobs previously, and she had sent me a list of jobs, and I had said, well, I'm not qualified.
Yeah.
And she's like, Claire, think like a man.
Yeah,
come on.
Literally, exactly.
Apply like a man.
Like you are qualified. You've seen it. You're meant to apply to it. That's like really the barometer.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. So that was interesting information. So I want to backtrack a little bit. So you've lived in multiple places. You lived in Toronto, LA, the Dominican Republic, and now New York City. Mm-hmm. How has that shaped your perspective on career entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, just moving around a lot as a kid and like to wildly different places. Okay, maybe not New York, LA, and Toronto, but the Dominican. I learned very early on just the skill of making friends and the skill of making anyone feel like a friend. And I think that that is the cornerstone of great business. I think it's the cornerstone of a great life, of great relationships, but like especially of business is doing business with people who you respect and admire and would want to be friends with. And I think that is so true, especially for me at Amulet. It's a recruiting firm. So much of being a recruiter is like making the candidate feel like you're their friend. And, you know, it's a big decision to switch jobs. And I think people don't just want to talk to a recruiter who's like hunting them. They want to talk to someone who can also be like, hey, if you don't like this position, no worries. I'll have another one come my way and we can talk then. And it's the same with business. Like with the founders I work with the founders for a while. So the engagements tend to be anywhere from like 2 to 4 or 5 months. I want to build out people's teams. And the best way to do that is to get to know them. What's their culture like? What are they going to be like if, someone's running late? What are they going to be like if someone had a bad day? What are they going to be like if someone had a great day? Are they, a company that loves to celebrate their wins, or are they a little more humble or a little more tactical? And I think from a young age, living in so many places, I learned to pick up on a lot of nuances and a lot of just how to make friends. And I think that that's the most important thing in every facet of my business.
Yeah, because I feel like people underestimate, the power of having and being really good at building and maintaining relationships. Like I feel like that can give you, that can open so many doors. Or maybe, for example, when it comes to getting a job, like a lot of people, really great people in really great companies got their jobs through networking.
100%. And networking is just making friends.
Yeah.
And I wish I had known that sooner, because I feel like it's marketed to like be serious and like you have to be like on your A game. And like, okay, yeah, you definitely can't be like tired and your social battery's out, but it's really just at the end of the day being able to make friends.
Yeah. And I also think there's when you network when you're younger, I'm talking like I'm 35.
Yeah, how old are you?
Sorry, not 35, because 35 is still young. I'm talking like I'm in my 60s. But I feel like me networking, I don't know about you, but me networking when I was younger was a lot more, it's just nerve-wracking. It was like, oh, I need to show up as this. I need to make them feel that. And I feel like that does come with the territory as you get older. You get more confident, but I still sometimes like show up to networking events. I have nothing to offer of value to these people. I'm very inexperienced.
Yep.
So I guess if you're someone early on in your career, what are some suggestions you have on how you could show up as yourself? And not like be authentic to yourself, not overstepping that line of being crazy or whatever. But how do you maintain that authenticity and also like balance professionalism?
Yeah.
How do you make yourself memorable? Is my question.
Okay, great question. Okay, wait, I'm going to answer in a twofold way.
Okay.
So first, to the authenticity, I think to make yourself authentic and feel like you're providing value even when you're inexperienced is to remember like a fundamental tenet of, I think, human, again, psychology and just like discussion is that like someone just wants to walk away feeling good. At the end of the day, people aren't going to really remember like who you are unless, I don't know, like you're an astronaut or something crazy. They're not going to remember like all these little details you tell them about yourself, but they are going to remember how you made them feel. And you don't need any experience to make someone feel great. You don't have to have done anything. You just have to make someone feel good. And I think that ties into what it takes to be memorable. You want someone to walk away feeling great and feeling like, wow, that person just made me feel great. And now I'm going to go about the rest of my networking events and just feeling great. I think another way to make yourself memorable is to tell stories. Stories can be anything. It can be from like a funny anecdote from that day. Like maybe you were running late and like you spilled coffee everywhere, or like it could be something about work and something that taught you resilience and grit and passion or whatever it is. But telling stories, people really, really remember a story that you tell them.
Okay. And so what's a time that you networked and it was like a clicking moment for you of, oh, I did this right, and it led to something after that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm gonna tell you a story. It's kind of a funny one.
Let me see the storytelling skills.
Let me tell you a story real quick. And it's a good one too, because it talks a bit about failures and I think side quests and like all of that jazz. Okay, so pan back to this summer when I just started Amulet. I was like a baby founder. No one knew who I was. I was like, what am I doing? Like, what if this doesn't work out? I'm going to move back with my mom, like whatever, I'll figure it out. And I was going to try to go to all these networking events because I was like, okay, if I can like get in the room places, talk to a founder, tell them about what I've done in-house, I know I can get clients. I registered for this VC event and I literally didn't get it. I was like, whatever, it's not a big deal. But the part that really hurt was I had sent it to a couple of my guy friends who are also founders. So they show up to the event. They're like, Coco, like, where are you? We're here. And I'm literally at home crying. I'm like, I actually didn't get accepted. But like,
why didn't you get accepted?
Whatever. I just started my company, limited space. Okay. But I was sad about it because I was like, I'm so embarrassed. Like I literally sent this to other people. They got accepted and I didn't. Like this is
that's
so
painful.
Sad.
That's painful.
But then the next day I get an email from one of my friends. He started a dating app called Marble. And he was like, hey, Coco, I know you didn't get into the event. I went and talked to the guy who threw it, was just, talking about how amazing you are. I think you guys should definitely connect. And then me and him got coffee. We hit it off. It's been a phenomenal relationship. And he's actually referred me business, clients, and candidates.
That's amazing.
So amazing. And yes, power of networking, but also it was a failure. I didn't get in. I was so sad about it. But I think this wouldn't have happened had I gone to the event because there would have been so many people.
Yeah.
And since I wasn't there, my friends, made a point to talk me up. And then, it's just kind of a phenomenal story.
Have you heard of the Chinese farmer parable?
No, but I love parables and stuff. So please tell me. This
literally reminds me of this parable. I learned it from my boss's book, How to Live an Extraordinary Life. So basically it's like the power of perspective and hindsight, right? So there's a farmer who has so there's a Chinese farmer. Yeah. There's a horse that comes to the farm.
Nice.
And his neighbors in the village are like, oh my gosh, you're so lucky. And he goes, I don't know, maybe. So the next day, the horse comes back with a herd of horses. Okay. And the neighbors are like, you're so lucky. And he goes, I don't know, maybe. And his son rides one of the horses and he breaks his leg. And then the village goes, oh my gosh, you're so unlucky. And he goes, I don't know, maybe. And then there's a war that happens. Okay. And soldiers come to recruit all the men in the village.
Yes.
And the son gets spared because he broke his leg. Mm-hmm. And then the villagers go, you're so lucky. And he goes, I don't know, maybe. So the power is in hindsight, right? It's always
100%.
20/20. And I feel like it's also about your perspective of how you want to spin it. Do you want to spin it in a positive way or a negative way? And sometimes you can't see that something was great
100%
until after the fact that it happened.
100%. Yeah.
Amen.
I love that parable.
Amen.
I'm for sure going to use that. When a candidate doesn't get a job, I'm going to be like, let me tell you.
Like this was meant to be.
Don't worry.
That's what I tell all my friends when they're heartbroken. It had to happen.
Yes, 100%.
100%. Even if it didn't, gaslight yourself into thinking that it did.
Yes.
Okay, so moving back to where you started being super passionate about recruitment, where did that come from?
Yes. Okay. Another story time.
Yes.
So I graduated UCLA and I graduated early. I initially went to UCLA. I think I wanted to be a doctor. Turns out I don't. Okay. So I graduated and I had kind of a tough time figuring out what I wanted to do. I made it to final stage interviews to Hindsight Global, which is a technical recruiting firm. And then my guy friend literally got the job and I was heartbroken, but I was like, whatever, I'll figure it out. Turns out it took me a long time to figure it out. I spent about a year. I was working in fashion, driving to downtown LA from the west side in 45-minute bumper to bumper traffic, twice a day. This was before the pandemic. And it was terrible. I was so depressed. I was I feel like I have all of this potential and all these ideas and I'm just not using my brain working in fashion at all. And then I got recruited to join a startup. I was the 10th hire and I had a phenomenal time there. I was there for almost 5 years. I touched every facet of the business while I was there, but I really found my stride in people development, talent acquisition, and recruiting. And I think what has just fueled me so much is I've been on the short end of the stick when it comes to the job market. And I was applying to everything. I was I've graduated from UCLA. There's no reason I shouldn't be finding things. Obviously, the reason was, the universe had something better in store. But
Chinese
I just,
farmer.
Yeah, exactly. But I just know what that was like. So yeah, and I think that's been my biggest thing while recruiting for startups is, yes, I'm here to help find the traditional profiles, but I'm really here to find the hidden gems. And that's why I called my company Amulet. And Amulet's a lucky charm or a hidden gem. Because I was I just think that there's people with amazing talent who are just getting overlooked by I don't know, these ATS, applicant tracking systems or AI now in recruitment. It's just filtering people based on resumes and LinkedIn's and there's just a really big missed opportunity for these hidden gems. And that's kind of my whole reason, for being a recruiter.
That's such a cool name. That was going to be my next question is how'd you get the name? That's amazing. Okay, so I wanted to dive into, I feel like you probably have such a wealth of knowledge on these different topics from a talent perspective.
Yeah.
So sorry, from the recruiting side, so for the companies and
Cool.
as well as for people that are looking for jobs,
Nice.
the talent itself. So focusing on the talent recruitment side, I think there seems to be an issue with a lot of people in the younger generation.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I see it as an issue. So the data behind it is that job hopping has increased substantially. So
Yes.
baby boomers, it says, change jobs on every 2.4 years on average between ages of 18 to 44, holding 11 employers total. Today, professionals aged 20 to 24 average 1.3 years per job compared to 4.9 years for those aged between 35 and 44. What are the trends you're seeing with that? Is that something that people in organizations look down upon when they see someone job hopping, or is it now becoming more acceptable?
Great question. Just so I can understand, do you want me to answer it for a founder or more for a candidate?
I think both.
Okay, awesome. What I'll say to that is yes, like the tenure of an employee these days is much, much shorter. And I think that there's a multitude of reasons for that. But I think the predominant one is that younger people have looked at statistics and can find that they are likely to make more money if they hop. Caveat, I don't think that's true in a startup. In a startup, if you stay for a long time, you can have rapid career growth. So even just looking at my own career, I was brought on as part-time customer success girly. And then 4 years later, I left as C-suite. I would not have had—
As you should.
As I should, thank you.
As
thank
you should. Period.
But I would never have been able to do that, not at a startup, like just realistically. So I think that I wish more candidates knew that. Like, hey, if you can tough it out in a startup, you can have just as much career growth, if not more, rather than job hopping.
But how, okay, so as a candidate, and I feel like this has been an issue with so many people I know, how do you find out or decide whether this is a grass is greener situation
100%.
or if it's actually somewhere that's not good for you, that's actually going to stunt your career growth?
100%. My hot take is the wrong jump is always better than staying somewhere longer, which is a hot take in this job market. I know.
In this economy?
Yeah, in this economy.
You're preaching this advice in this economy.
Hot take, but I will preach that. I'll, shout that from the rooftops for younger people, especially when you're at a place in your life and your career where you don't have a ton of liabilities, you don't have children, you don't have a mortgage. Take the risks now. It's only going to get harder in our lives to take risks. So I will stand by that.
Okay. So you're saying, so if it's better to, let's say I'm in an unhealthy work environment or my boss overpromised and under-delivered, it's better for me to make a jump to a company that might potentially be better or worse?
Okay, I don't want to give any two black and whites, but I'm just more so trying to, I want to encourage more people in their lives to take risks. And just believe in themselves and believe what they can do. But I do believe in staying somewhere for a long time. So when I'm looking at candidates, I look to see that they've, stayed somewhere at least 2 years. But I don't think it's a hard and fast rule.
Okay.
But it is important in the sense of it's also industry to industry. So like salespeople love to jump 1 year. An operations person, a little less so. Your day-to-day isn't as volatile. So I think you can stick it out somewhere longer. And I do think it's important to try to find a forever home that you can stay for like 4 years plus. But at the same time, if it's not right, make the jump. So I was in my career, I was at Stock Navigators for 4.5 years. Then I was at a seed venture fund for 4 months. And then I started my company. So, I'm so glad that I left the seed venture fund after 4 months. But at the same time, I'm so glad that I stayed where I was before for 4 years. Okay. So I think a good discernment tool for candidates is like, how do you know if somewhere the grass is green or not? Ask the right questions. One thing, and this is also something that I do for founders on the candidate side, is I'm very open and honest. So at the end of the interview, I'm kind of like, hey, and this is something I saw from Layla Hermosi. I love her. I think she's a legend. She's so
I
cool.
pitched her to interview her. She didn't answer.
Stop. She accepted my LinkedIn connection request. And I was like, this is the best day of my life. No, literally.
Okay, I'm obsessed. Continue.
But this is a tip from her. And I literally use it now every time. At the end of the interview, I go, okay, we've talked about so many amazing things about you. I've talked about so many amazing things about this company, but I want to just be honest and transparent with you about some of the not so amazing things. I'm like, look, it's an early stage startup. It's chaotic. It's a mess. It's the CEO, CTO's first time being leaders. They're figuring it out. They're working out of a co-working space. It's really just an old apartment. Things are crazy, but I'm telling you, they're really, really smart. They're genuine. They're going to push you, but they're going to get you to where you want to go. And then I'll be like, in that kind of spirit of honesty, is there anything on your end that, you know, maybe previous managers have told you, something that like you need to work on? And then they'll give me their answer. And during that, what I'm doing is I'm screening for if their weakness is something that the team I'm hiring for can accommodate. So let's say it's an early stage startup, right? And the person's like, yeah, I've been told a ton of times I just don't move fast enough. Hey, that's great for you. You're not going to cut it in an early stage startup. I can't train that out of you. But if they're like, hey, sometimes I get ahead of myself and I rush. Awesome. You're hired. We can tell you to slow down. That's easy. That's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
But I think that it's important for both the founders to be asking those questions and then also for candidates too. Just ask as a candidate, just being like, hey, you know, I'm so excited about this opportunity. Is there anything like that maybe is not so great? Or like, what are the weaknesses of this position? And yes, unfortunately, not everyone is as open and honest as I am. But I think that the more that you yourself are, you'll attract people like that in your life.
So as a candidate, you know, the funny thing is I was talking to someone about this the other day. I feel like job hunting is like dating.
Yes.
It literally is like dating
100%.
Because you're evaluating each other. You want to make sure you both
I feel like
each
I'm
other.
a matchmaker.
Exactly. You're presenting,
I
you're
literally
kind of
feel
like
like
presenting
that.
the best version of yourself to them.
100%.
So if we refer to job hunting in relationship terms, how do you sort through the job managers, headhunters, any of those things that are trying to love bomb you and essentially overpromise the world, and essentially when you join, it ends up falling short? How do you sort through that? Is there any way you can sort through that?
Yeah, good question. I think ask the right questions. The interview cycle should be at least 4 to 5, if not more. I know that candidates can get a little annoyed when it's a long, tough interview cycle, but I think that's better because you're going to get to know what they're actually going to be like working. The longer that their interview cycles are, I think that that's important. Also, meeting other people from the team is really important. Even if that's not a formal part of the interview cycle, I would ask. I'd just be like, hey, I'm like seriously consider working here. Is there any way I could speak to so-and-so? And then the last thing I'd say is meet them in person if you can. Even if it's a remote position, meet someone in person. You can pick up on so much information if you go into someone's like co-working space or office and meet them in person.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
And when it comes to getting ghosted, how do you, I guess, when's the appropriate time?
Yeah.
Because when I was looking for a job a long time ago, before I joined Activant, I just remember, you know, I'm applying to hundreds of jobs and I'm competing with agents, probably AI agents. I'm competing with 100%. People who are super overqualified, applying to jobs that they're overqualified for. How do you, I guess, like when's the appropriate time to follow up? How many times can you follow up?
Great question.
Is there a limit? Does it depend by industry?
Great question. I'm going to pull from the Hermosis again because I love them. Be annoying. Follow up as many times as you need. I would say 3 to 4 is like the max.
Okay.
But if you are a naturally persistent person and you're persistent in your follow-ups, the right company is going to like that you are persistent and followed up. The wrong company won't like that, but then they're not for you. I say 3 to 4 times is appropriate. Be strategic in the timing of those. Like, don't follow up with someone when they're going to be peak busy. You know, be a little clever. Like, okay, when would this hiring manager maybe check LinkedIn at an off time and be like, oh, I forgot about this person. Like, maybe I should talk to them. And then the other thing I'd say is sometimes you just got to accept you might be ghosted, and that's okay. And it sucks.
It does.
Let me tell you, both on the candidate side, but also as a recruiter, I get ghosted all the time. a great candidate will be talking to me. Then they'll stop talking to me and I'm like, no, like, what have I done? Like,
is it me?
Is it me? Like, you hated my last LinkedIn post? Like, what is it? Just tell me. But yeah, you just kind of got to chalk it up to it's part of the process.
Okay. And then the last one, which I love in reference to dating, people talk about settling in relationships, right?
Yeah.
And job seekers do the same thing, especially
100%.
when it comes to being in a desperate situation.
Yes.
What's your advice for someone who needs a job now, but you don't want them to make a decision that they're going to potentially regret later?
100%. I would say you got to look at the big picture. I think that that's so important. A job it's like a core pillar of your life. It's not just something that makes money. It's something that makes you happy. It's something that I think fundamentally changes who you are. If you have, a lot of liabilities or things where you need something secure, settling might be the right move for this step in your life. But if you're someone young, you're figuring it out.
I just feel like now you shouldn't settle.
Yes, risk it. Don't settle. Like, if you don't have, like, it's very different. Again, you're at different points in your life. If you have kids and a family and a mortgage, different conversation.
Yeah.
But I think if you're young and you're kind of just figuring it out, like, don't be boring. Like, leave that consulting job, leave that banking job, join a startup. Like, it's now or never. Urgency is important. Love what you're going to do. Love every minute of it. And if you don't, like, make a long-term game plan to get to where you want to be in the next 2 to 4 years.
And so for candidates who don't really know what they want to do,
Great question.
What can they do to figure it out? Because I
That's
feel like especially me personally, I'm going through this experience as well. Like, where do I see myself in 10 years? I literally don't even know where I see myself tomorrow. Okay.
Great question. No, literally. For that, I would say try out as many things as you can, the youngest you possibly can. But if you're a little more senior in your career and you're still trying to figure that out, kind of microdose it in small, like, maybe creative ways. So, like, I never really thought I would be in a sales role, but now as a founder and CEO, I'm kind of in a sales role. But I figured that I would like that because when I looked back at kind of all the threads of my career, I was like, I love talking to people. And although I'd never done sales, I knew that I liked talking to people. And I took a ton of personality tests too. I think personality tests are another really great way to see what you're intrinsically good at and intrinsically like. I like to call it like your zone of genius. So you can be good at a ton of things, but every person kind of has a zone of genius that's just like their ish. And for me, I took a lot of personality tests and I always would get winning others over as one of like a pretty core strength of mine.
I see it.
And that's a sales skill. So I'd say for people who, one, try everything out if you can, if your job has that opportunity. If not, take personality tests and try to create parallels in your day-to-day life that are analogous to, what kind of roles you would want to be interested in.
Is there anything, so outside of the personality test, are there any books that you've read or podcasts that you listen to?
Yeah.
My friend sent me this book, Design Your Life. I've heard Design
I've read
Your
that.
Life is
Great
very,
book.
very good.
Great book.
In terms of you figuring out what you're interested in, what makes you happy, what makes you tick. Are there any other recommendations you have?
Yes. If you're in your 20s, The Defining Decade, it's all about being in your 20s.
My parents have drilled that into me.
It is
so
the best book ever. It's the best book ever.
Kind of sends me spiraling, but like
it's very scary. The last chapter is so scary.
So what was your what were your key takeaways from that book?
Yeah. So I read that at like 22, 23. Key takeaways first were, just the relationship stuff, where it was like, if you're going to move in with a guy, you should be thinking about it as like, I might get married to him, because the likelihood, it's just like way statistically less likely that you will break up with someone that like you live with and that you've built a life with than just a boyfriend who like you have your own apartment, he has his own apartment. So I take that very seriously. Two, and this is a sad one that I didn't really want to touch on the podcast, but fertility. I think women are being sold a lie that it's easy to have kids after 35. It's not for everyone. It's easy for some women, and those tend to be the stories that you hear about. But the majority of women, it's not easy for. If you want to have kids, like, kids are a massive, massive change in your life that you need to prepare for well in advance. And you got to be thinking about that sooner rather than later. Also, outside of all this fertility stuff, like, my aunt is a doctor. She helped with the HPV vaccine. She like knows her shit. So she'll always be like, yeah, you can maybe have a kid after 35, but I'm also going to let you know, like, pushing out a baby at 37 is a lot harder than doing it at 31.
Yeah.
Significantly.
Your body reacts differently.
Exactly. So that's something important.
So how are you taking that into consideration?
I think I'm at a place now in my life where I'm like, hey, if I get married and have kids in my early 30s, that's amazing. I'm going to be so happy and I would happily do that. But if I also don't, I'm still going to be happy and I'll figure it out because I love my job and I love my friends and I love my life. And I'm very fortunate to have that kind of mindset because I don't think I always did.
It seems like you have more of the abundance mindset. So how do you balance the desire to find someone and find your person versus like the desire to pursue?
Oh my God,
career?
Yeah, 100%. I think I think that's a limiting belief. I think you can have both. Do I think you can do everything all at once always? No. I don't think you can have 4 kids and be a CEO. I mean, that's just going to be stressful. Like, I don't want to do that.
Unless you're a successful CEO, then you got the 5 nannies at home, but your kids might end up messed up.
Exactly. I don't know the cost of that. I don't really want psychopath children, but like, we'll see. But yeah, I think like there's different eras for your life. You also can't control when things are happening. So just like be grateful for when they do happen. But I do think that is a limiting belief. I think if you are a woman who really wants a great career, but you also want to find your person, I think your person will support that you want a really great career. And if not, then you got to look in the mirror and decide what's more important to you. And like, it's different for everyone. But yeah, Defining Decade, great book. Last point I'll say on that is with the career stuff. It basically was saying that your 20s, the decade of your 20s isn't just a playground to figure out what you want to do in your 30s. It's actually more somewhere you lay the foundations. I think that your early 20s are maybe a bit more of a playground for figuring out what you want to do.
Yeah.
But I would say once you get to mid to late, start to form an idea. And heck, even if it's the wrong idea, give it your all while you don't have, again, that much other commitments. And then you can always course correct later. Like, it's so much better to like, I don't know, really, really try for something and fail and it not work out than to kind of give it half. And then you're always left wondering like, oh, what if I did better here? What if I tried harder here?
Yeah, no, because I always say this, the pain of regret is way worse, infinitely worse than the pain of failure.
100%.
Seriously.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so now moving on to the recruitment side. So for founders looking for talent.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest mistakes that founders make when it comes to anything related to talent?
Great question. I think a big mistake is not having a great hiring strategy. At the end of the day, again, I operate a little differently because I come from in-house talent acquisition, advising a CEO on who to hire, building out org charts. So when I work with my clients, I'm very, very involved in the strategy behind who are we looking for, when's the start date, what are the profiles. If a founder gives me a profile that I don't think would be great at the job, I'll push back. But I don't think all recruiters do that because most founders are going to recruiters just as an extra moat for candidates. So on the founder end, I'd say really take time to understand human psychology and how people work and how that is going to fundamentally affect your business. Know what your business growth strategy is and hire accordingly. But really, really be strategic about it. And also think like a team. I think so many founders want mini versions of themselves. And I'm like, you wouldn't get along with a mini version of yourself. You guys would be arguing and fighting. Like, you're building out a team. Everyone needs to have different strengths and different weaknesses. It's kind of like a family, you know? You need to have a bit of everything there. So really think about it in terms of just a human psychology way, like kind of principles first.
And when it comes to hiring people, so is it better to hire very expensive, high quality talent up front?
Great question.
Or the cheaper talent that might not be as high quality, but maybe you could get more? And how does that vary throughout the stages of like fundraising?
Great question. It definitely varies throughout the stages. I think if you're later stage, you want people with more hard skills that are a little less malleable. But I work with early stage startups. You want people who are just like all potential and can figure it out and who will grow with your company. You want people who maybe, don't have all the hard skills you're looking for, but when you talk to them, you're like, they get it. Like they could figure it out. They get it. Because when you're early stage, everything's a mess. Everything's chaotic. It's not like you have some onboarding plan that's detailed day by day. It's not like,
you
a lot of
have an onboarding plan.
Exactly. Might even have an onboarding plan. Like a lot of these CEOs, it's their first time being CEOs too. Like they're just learning for the first time too. So I like that dynamic too of like when it is a first time or second time CEO with people with a little more potential, because I think it also helps them leadership train and helps those people become more professional. But if you're a later stage, you need people with a little more just like the hard skills and who maybe are a little more expensive and less malleable.
And when it comes to, I guess, the first hire, do people always, because I feel like sometimes there's the debate, and maybe this depends based on industry, but is it always it's always the engineers that get hired first, I guess, right? And then it's the sales and then marketing or stuff. I know absolutely nothing about.
Depends again on industry. And again, I'm going to bring it back to strengths-based leadership and team dynamics. I think like founders, you're building this business for you. It's your business. Like what's going to work for you? That's what's most important. Like what is going to work for you so that you can lead this company to hit its true potential. Read as many books as you want. Scaling People is a fantastic book. I definitely recommend all founders read that. Also, How to Be a Great Boss by Gino Wickman is another good one. But at the end of the day, like it doesn't really matter what's in a book. What matters is how is someone going to work with you, and you want to be around people who bring out the best sides of you.
Yeah, and
that's what you should look for in a candidate too.
And how can managers be better managers? If I'm to be a manager one day, which I would love to be, what would make me a great manager?
That's a really great question. I too have had terrible managers, and I also have been blessed with having one of the best managers and mentor and now very dear friend of mine. What he did that really, really shaped me was he made it very clear what my strengths were. And he would always try to get me to use those. But he was also tough with me about what I wasn't good at. He would always tell me, Coco, you're this, you're that, you're not good at this. Sometimes I would cry. And I'm so glad that he gave me that feedback because it molded me into who I am. Yeah. Actually, funnily enough, when I first started working with him, he was the one who was like, hey, I think you'd be a great recruiter and a great headhunter. You should try doing it. And he listened to one of my interviews and he gave me feedback. He was like, that was really terrible. You interrogated that person. You weren't bubbly, you weren't warm. That wasn't you. What's going on? Like, are you ever going to get this? And I was sobbing. I was like, oh my God, I'm like the worst recruiter ever. Like, I'm so bad at my job. And then I just started journaling and I was like, he's right. I was really bad on that call. Like, I did a terrible job. I was like, that's not me. That's not how I sound. Like, I'm sunny and I'm friendly and I'm nice and I just need to work on this. And, here we are. So I think great managing, great leadership, and I think as an adjacent one day, being a great parent too, is bringing out the best in people, challenging them, and also letting them know what they're not so good at. Yeah. I think a lot of people underestimate how important positive affirmations are and words of affirmation because people start to act in line with who you believe them to be. So like if you have a manager who just like already doesn't like you, you're just going to they're always going to see you like that. And you're almost just going to like fall to that expectation that they've set on you. But if you have a manager who has high expectations for you and sees you for who you are and your shortcomings too, you're going to be like, wait, like they look at me like this. Like I want to actually like fall in line with the way that they look at me and be that person.
And you want to live up to those expectations and those hopes that they have of you. Yeah. I mean, I feel like everyone's way of receiving, Anthony actually taught me this, everyone's way of receiving feedback is very different. So as a manager, you have to, like certain people don't want to hear hard criticism. Yep. I, for one, am like, lay it on me.
Yeah,
Tell me exactly what I'm doing.
But
also the important thing is, which my other boss, who I also loved, Ho Chung, he told me this, don't come to me with a problem unless you have the solution.
100%.
So I feel like especially being early on in my career, I really appreciate it when like Anthony or Max, I'm naming all my amazing bosses right now, but like
I hope they listen.
any of them say like, okay, here's where you fell short. Yeah. Here's what you could be doing better and here's how you could be doing better. Because I feel like the issue is sometimes is like okay, you suck at this. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
But how, I don't have the experience of knowing what it's like to be good at that thing.
Yes.
So you need to tell me how it can be better.
Yeah. It's like positive affirmation and empowerment is just so important. I think the more that you can empower others to see themselves as the best version of themselves, the more that they'll act in that line. I think another really important thing that has been a company value at all the companies I've worked at, and also as a personal value of mine, is growth, being growth oriented. As a human being and in my career and my personal life, I kind of walk through life seeing everything as an opportunity for growth, whether that's literally something small where like you and I were texting and I was like, stop, I can't sit on the right side. Like that's my bad side. And then I was like, you know what? This is a growth opportunity from the universe. I can deal with it and stop being a narc.
That's such a happy attitude to go about life.
Yeah.
You're very glass half full then.
Very glass half full.
And how did you become that way?
Took a lot of failing. It took working in an early stage startup where some months we were doing great. Next months it was like, I don't know if we can keep these lights on anymore. Like, and it took a lot of faith. It took a lot of resilience. Took a lot of personal reflection. I spent a lot of time journaling and reframing things because, you know, again, like I think that so many people don't realize how difficult it is to actually achieve your goals and dreams because you kind of almost see people at the tail end when they've already done it. You don't hear about all these like little things along the way. Mm-hmm. But the more that I think we share the little things along the way and also see every single failure is like, okay, you got this. Like this is a new place for you, a new arena for you. It's okay if you try and you suck at it. Like it's fine. It's really important.
And how do you balance that line between being overly critical and overly harsh on yourself versus having that growth mindset? Because I think there's like a fine line. I feel like I'm fully on the overly critical side.
Me too sometimes, for
like,
sure.
Okay, I'm horrible at this. I'm horrible at this. Let me read 10 books about why I need to be better and all this stuff. And I feel like that's just not necessarily a healthy mindset because you don't celebrate your small wins. So I think there's an advantage to being overly critical is that nothing is ever good enough. And then
push yourself.
The downside to that is that nothing is ever good enough.
Good enough, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So how do you find that balance? Because it seems like you do have that balance.
Thank you.
Lay it on me.
Appreciate that.
Tell me how I can be better.
Okay, so if you're someone who's naturally hard on yourself, I would say first off, pat yourself on the back for that because that feeling of inadequacy is what is going to make you great. It is the motivating and driving force behind your success, and be proud of it. Another thing that's good to remember is no one is as hard on yourself as the critical voice in your head, and learn to become friends with that person. So like if the voice in your head is being critical, it's just kind of your friend who's like always on your back, but like they have your best at heart. Mm-hmm. See it as that. And then the other thing, which is a little cheesy and cute, is count your blessings. I think I made a big habit. I did both those things. And then the last one I did is I make a big habit every day before I go to bed to be like, what were my favorite parts of the day? What am I proud of myself for? Even if I had a terrible day, I do it. Mm-hmm. And it makes a really, really big difference. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. If it's so wholesome, I could cry.
It's the wholesome stuff.
I aspire to have that sort of mentality. I got my friend Mia put me on the 5-minute gratitude journal.
Yes, no, it's literally like
doing that.
Yes, it's literally just like that, 100%. Yeah.
So I guess I understand the practice I need to do that. Now that you're saying it, how do you get to that point of mentally just that shift? Like that shift has to happen for you to accept those blessings, right? To count your blessings, you have to accept that they're blessings.
Yes.
How do you do that?
I think that there is a big misconception that there is just going to be a shift, because there isn't. Really? You actually have to start counting your blessings even when you do it and you're like, this is so cheesy. Like, this is like a joke. Why am I doing this? You still do it. It's almost like going to the gym. Like you go to the gym and you might hate it the first couple of times, but you're still going to go, and then eventually you'll see progress. So kind of with any mindset shift is like your brain and your neurons are constantly firing in the same pathways. So the way that neurons kind of work is they form neural networks, and the more that they fire between each other, the more that pathway strengthens. So your neurons are basically being hard on themselves. So that is a very strong ingrained pattern in your brain. To do that, yeah, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of self-will. It takes a lot of discipline. But our neurons, luckily, throughout the rest of our entire lives, can form new neural networks. And every time that like you form a new thought, you're strengthening a better neural network and you're strengthening a new mindset and a new unlock in your life that can really get you to that next level. And it's going to feel hard at first. It will. And it's not just a shift. It's an ingrained, it's a pattern, it's a habit. It's a daily grind. Yeah. The easiest way is the hardest way forever and ever. Yeah.
So you, in terms of the inner peace, it sounds like. Yeah. Do you have any spirituality?
I'm very spiritual. Yes, I'm very spiritual.
Okay, in what sense?
I think I'm just, okay, a little bit more about my background. I had a little bit of an interesting background. So part of my young childhood schools, it's called St. Luke's in the West Village here in New York. And it was technically like an Episcopalian Christian school. We went to like a service every Thursday, but we had a religion class. We learned about every single religion. Like I read the Quran,
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, I read the Old Testament. So it wasn't
just explicitly.
Exactly. I read Hindu works. I read everything. And I think that just taught me that like all these religions are just repackaged wrappers for one, I think, kind of fundamental spiritual truth of like just being a good person. And like if you treat others the way you want to be treated, you know, you'll kind of manifest more of that into your life. So I think that is foundationally what has made me spiritual. And then on top of that, you know, my dad is an atheist, my mom's Christian. I also grew up in a household that had a bit of a different dynamic, but there was an underlying kind of like, you know, treat others how you want to be treated. And then I am astrology girly for sure.
Okay.
Like big time. But I think that's more just because I'm a big believer of like, even if something is placebo, if it empowers you, that's what matters. Like, I think so many people are looking for the secret to spirituality or the secret to God or the secret to religion or the secret to life. Like, it doesn't actually matter if it's scientifically true. Like, what matters is like, is this something that's empowering you to be your best self? Yes, then awesome, keep doing it. As long as it's not hurting anyone and it's bringing up others.
Yep, that's my philosophy as well. I'm personally not spiritual, but I see my friends who are, and I think it's such a beautiful, it's such a beautiful thing. And I think that, yes, people can argue, okay, religion can be used to justify
100%
beliefs that are, you know, racist, homophobic, xenophobic,
100%.
All these things, whatever. But in the case of, I can give you an example, like my nanny who raised me for 9 years, she passed away from cancer when I was a senior in high school. Her name was Miss Kim. She was an icon.
That is an iconic name. She sounds like a diva.
Miss Kim was a gem.
She sounds like a
this
diva.
Young, cute, like Vietnamese woman who was an absolute gem. So I remember when she was told she had stage 4 cancer.
Yeah.
I was literally sobbing. I was like beside myself. I was like, what do you mean I'm not going to see you anymore?
Yeah.
And she goes, Claire, she's like, I'm the happiest I've ever been. And I was like, what literally, what are you talking about right now?
That is pretty dark.
She was like, I'm the happiest I've ever been. She's like, God is taking me to be an angel.
Cute.
And I was like, okay.
You're like, you're delusional because you have stage 4 cancer.
That's crazy. But I'm here for it. You should see a doctor. But there was so much beauty in the fact that she felt so at peace. And I see like my friend Lonnie, who's super into astrology as well. Like I feel like you reach such a level of emotional depth
100%.
And I find it very inspiring.
Yeah. Also on a side note, there's a lot of these spirituality things like astrology and then also numerology. There's, I think, 9 life paths. There's basically 9 life paths and every person can fit into a category. That has been rebranded for the male-dominated work culture as personality tests. So Enneagrams are a really big personality test moat. They also have 9 types. Also, if you look at a lot of the kind of Myers-Briggs and the psychology behind it,
Myers-Briggs,
they fit pretty in line with the personality types of astrology. So I'm a really big believer that a lot of fundamental truths in life have been marketed as completely different things to actually divide people rather than to bring them together. And I think the more that people and again, this ties back to my religion thing. Like, again, I think organized religion has done horrific things, but I think some of the most wholesome things in life tend to attract some of the worst people.
Yeah.
And I think if we're able to just strip away all these things that are dividing us and just more look at like what's uniting us, I think that's just really important. Also, I don't know how we got on this massive tangent.
Amen.
I'm like, what? I feel like a pastor or something.
Preach. Okay, my last question is, given your experience in recruiting, you said you've been blessed with the experience of having amazing bosses, amazing mentors. What are 3 of the biggest lessons that you've learned from those people or that person?
Wow.
Personally or professionally?
I've learned how to be less of a perfectionist, which was really difficult, and give myself the space to make mistakes and make them loudly and embarrass myself in front of everyone and continue to pick myself back up and do things imperfectly. That would be the number one. That's the biggest one. The second one was what I touched on earlier of, it's a funny story. So me and my boss at the time, his name's Jason. He lives in Puerto Rico. He's like a crypto trader. He's like such a diva, like Bastiana. First day on the job, he like takes me on a walk. And he's like, oh, this like guy on Grindr keeps hitting me up. And I'm like, stop, like, let's go on a walk and talk about it. So he was such a great mentor and friend to me. And he actually, when I got my first promotion, took me on a trip to Mexico.
Oh,
he was like,
nice.
Let's go to Mexico. And he sat me down and was like, Coco, you have so much potential. I just want to give you a bit of advice. And we're at breakfast. And he goes, people aren't going to remember how smart you are. They're not going to remember what you look like. They're not going to remember what you tell them. They're not going to remember what you did, but they're going to remember how you made them feel. And that was just such a massive unlock for me in a moment where I was like, wow, maybe I shouldn't be a raging bitch all the time. Like, what?
True.
And then the third one I'd say is, I think the third one I'd say is be strategic. Like in your career, in your life, especially for founders who are building businesses or working in the startup arena, like I think running a successful business is a lot about strategy. Mm-hmm. There's going to be so many decisions that you have to make as you scale your business that there's no right or wrong. And you're more just trying to make the right decision given the resources and the information that you have. You don't know what you don't know. And that's a really tough thing, is to be making decisions when you just don't know all the information. So be strategic. Learn first thinking principles and mindset principles that can be applied to any situation in life. I really love Farnham Street. Shane Paris talks about like just so many foundational things on decision making, on strategic indexing, on understanding how to sift through important and non-important information. Another good thing is knowing when to take feedback. You should really only take feedback from people that you'd want to be like. You know, if you're a founder and you don't know what to do, or if you're even someone who's a bad manager, you know, if your bad manager is giving you bad feedback, don't take it unless you want to be like your bad manager. And the same thing for founders. You know, you're going to go out into the world and you're going to get so much advice from so many people, and it's so hard to filter what's right for you. And you have to kind of step back and think like, would I want this person's life? Not all of it, but would I want to be like them? Mm-hmm. If so, amazing, take their feedback. But like, there's just been so many times where I think, especially in this day and age with social media, like we're absorbing information and feedback from people where it's like, we don't even want to actually be like them. Like they have massive personal life issues going on.
Andrew Tate.
Exactly. I mean, Elon Musk. And I'm like, you don't actually want their lives. Like you wouldn't want to be like them. So you should be very wary of like at what expense you take feedback. So yeah, I think strategy and being strategic and who you listen to, who's in your corner is really important.
Amazing. Yeah. Those are all very good advice. Well, tell everyone how they can get in contact with you, how they can stay updated with you. She does post great advice on LinkedIn for founders and for talent, I will say. Tell people how they can support you.
Yeah, of course. Definitely LinkedIn. That's kind of my predominant channel. I post new job opportunities there, job postings. that's kind of where I do most of my activity. But I did just start a Twitter account. So that's a little spicier. Yeah, it's a little spicier. I'm posting memes. So go there if you want to laugh. But if you actually want to work with Amulet, or if you'd like to be a candidate for Amulet, definitely find me on LinkedIn.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I had such a wonderful time. Thank you.
Thank you.